How often do you end up overcommitting to something or declining and then later regretting that why didn't you take that opportunity? This has often happened to me, and that is why this book, Hell Yeah or No, really helped me to understand what's worth doing. Let's begin. This book has loads of lessons, but I'm just sharing 7 of them with you. I will be highlighting some points and sharing my experience on how you can implement these in your life. But this is not that is all there in this book. The book is filled with many more such improvement techniques. So you can read the book if this interests you. And let's begin. Every novel has characters. What makes them unique are their characteristics. Similarly, in life, Derek Sivers, the author of the book, says that little things we do make our character. He states, how you do anything is how you do everything. It all matters. And I must say that I cannot agree more to this, because it is changing those little things in my life that has helped me become more disciplined and has changed my life in a positive way. If you're following others and blaming others for your own predicament, then you will never grow. Changing your character by making these little choices and building positive habits is what you need. Changing yourself from a flat side character to a protagonist of your life story is what you need. These little changes can range from getting up early in the morning or journaling every day. It can be as little as saving money. But these little choices are the things that make your character. In the second section of the story, I could not decide which chapter was most influential to me. Number 1, tilting your mirror. Number 2, quitting something you love. Therefore, I highlight both. In the chapter Tilting My Mirror, Derek Sivers narrates a story of him driving. But his attention is constantly on the mirrors, looking at the distractions behind him. A little tilting of the mirror helped him to focus more on the beautiful surroundings rather than in the distractions behind him. This metaphor perfectly fits to show that social media comments, distracting environment, discouraging family members, and your email inbox can be what's spoiling your motivation to do something, not letting you enjoy the process. Get over these. Personally, I try to change my relationship with these little things. I turn off my notification, block unwanted emailers, and shut myself in a room to create. And if any app or platform is unavoidable, like WhatsApp, I try to create a very professional and limited relationship with it, not letting the distractions become a habit. That brings us to quitting something you love. The 2 words here are so potent. Quitting, which Derek says in Old French means to free or to release. It's such an interesting way to see a negatively connotated word like quitting, as letting go of something that's perhaps your limiting factor. And then love. We love the familiar, what we are comfortable with, and what we can do easily, which often limits us from exploring and trying something new. Rabindranath Tagore, in his song offering 63 of Gitanjali, writes about such familiarity. I quote, "Thou hast made me known to friends whom I knew not. Thou hast given me seats in homes not my own. Thou hast brought the distant near and made a brother of the stranger." These lines show how familiarity can be a limiting factor and how overcoming it is so essential. Ever since I have read this line, it has stuck with me, and I have always tried to do something new, to create something out of the box. In today's world, I call it living in a bubble, fed constantly similar things revolving around likes and dislikes. Often forget that there's a life beyond it. We need to get out of these and explore. There's a joy in things you do not know, in the third section of the book, the chapter named There Are Always More Than Two Options was really impactful. More so because it gave me some assurance to my thoughts that was similar to this. I tend to switch often and take the less taken path in search of doing something unique and end up making a mixture of all the things that I want to do. This chapter talks about how we can create a dilemma for ourselves, restricting ourselves to only two options. Derek says to add more extreme and even unlikely options to the two final options: do nothing or to go insane. I think what he means is that there are always more than two choices. It's not that the two options will be completely different from your final two, but they can be close variations or at least new approaches that give you much more room to decide what is worth doing. A job or a business, perhaps both, or perhaps to take a detour and do something else. Brainstorming more ideas and hybrid options gives you a clearer vision of what your final decision will be. In the fourth section, the chapter Everything is My Fault was really shocking. I personally loved this chapter because it talks about something that I recently implemented in my life. We often think in terms of others and base our actions around it. Any low point in our life is attributed to someone else's fault. We often get busy blaming others rather than looking into ourselves. Then comes the strenuous process of forgiving that can take months or years sometimes. But a simple change in perspective can be an easy skip button to this process. The trick really sounds simple, but it's very difficult to do, is to just accept it. Like Derek says, and I quote, "Now you are the person who made these things happen, made a mistake, and now you can learn from it." This acceptance not only shortens the process of dealing with a mishap or a misunderstanding, but also makes it easier for you to cope with it. As you start to see every downfall as a lesson to rise up again, take responsibility, be it in a relationship or life. In general, it makes you feel more in control, and it empties your brain from the stressful cycle of blaming and forgiving. The next section brings a chapter that's called Happy, Smart, and Useful. Whatever we do in life, we do it to make ourselves happy, right? Or maybe to earn a lot of money, or just to make ends meet. Or perhaps we are doing it to help others. We often think of it as three vertices of a triangle, far apart from each other. But let us think of it as a Venn diagram that overlaps with each other. Derek says that we often dwell in the intersections of two but forget one. Abiding in only one is not desirable, as it can lead to monotony and saturation and lack overall fulfillment. On the contrary, dwelling between two can be a sweet spot, as we often follow what's told to us or what is good for us, but in the long term that gives us sustainable income and perhaps provide value to others. But happiness is the oil. Without it, long-term engagement can be difficult. Similarly, without being useful to others, everything can become a very self-centered endeavor. And being only happy and useful can be detrimental to personal gain. As Derek says, neither of them is bad and can work. But ideally, we should be right there in the middle, having a balance between all the three. We often avoid what scares us. But in the next section, Derek says, whatever scares you, go do it. In this chapter, Derek talks about how there can be small things that intimidate you and even big ideas that terrify you. He says to embrace that moment and go do it. He calls this fear a form of excitement, which in turn leads you to do things because you are excited about it. Once you do something that you're scared of, you're not scared of it anymore. This resonated with me deeply, as I found it quite relatable. I've always preached about how fear and nervousness are just normal human instincts, and we should recognize and accept them, which helps us cope with them better rather than trying to avoid them. I think recognition of such aspects can really help you understand yourself better and overcome that barrier of fear. So I hope these 7 lessons were helpful to you. Make sure you comment which lesson was the most helpful to you. And you can also write down some personal tips for others to implement in their own life. And make sure you go and read this book, because this has to offer a lot more than I have talked about today. Take care and bye-bye.